Well, good morning, I almost said. I'm very pleased to welcome President Metsola here and a delegation from the Conference of Presidents of the European Parliament to Stockholm, obviously due to the reason of the Swedish upcoming presidency of the European Council. This visit marks the important relation between the presidency of the Council and the European Parliament, and there is also a tradition to have this kind of rendezvous. Today we will discuss the broader political issues and challenges for the upcoming 6 months and beyond. It has been fruitful, open, frank discussions. Me and my government are grateful for important input from the European Parliament ahead of our presidency of the Council. There is no doubt that the consequences of Russia's aggression against Ukraine will remain a very key issue during our presidency, sadly to say, honestly. We both agree on the importance of supporting Ukraine and maintaining the important unity of the EU. That's a strength, really, to stick to. Other key issues during the Swedish presidency will be handling the energy crisis for obvious reasons, accelerating the green transition and strengthening the competitiveness of the EU in times of economic stagnation. Crisis management is needed, but is not sufficient. We have long-term obligations as well. These are broad political challenges where a close cooperation between the Parliament and the Council of the EU is of utmost importance. Today, I have also underlined the great importance of standing up for our fundamental principles of Europe, protecting the rule of law. This has always been and will always be of great importance for Sweden. We also expect a lot of legislative work and a large number of proposals to be subject to final negotiations between the Council and the European Parliament during these 6 months. Both institutions have a responsibility in moving forward these negotiations in order to reach agreements. As presidency, we will strive to advance these negotiations as far as is possible. Finally, it has also been very inspiring to hold the meeting here at Stockholm Exergy. A bit chilly, I admit, right now, but we will soon be warm again. This is a great example on how the green transition looks like in practice and how important innovation is for competitiveness, but also for energy security and for society at large. Again, I would like to underline the importance of close cooperation ahead of the Swedish presidency, especially in the current situation. The unity of the EU is more important than perhaps ever before. Thank you so much. I leave the floor to President Metsola. Roberta, please.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Dear Ulf, good morning. Thank you for the invitation and this opportunity for myself and the leaders of all the political groups in the European Parliament to visit you in beautiful and already wintry Stockholm. I know that you are only 6 weeks into your mandate and that there is just a month to go before you take over the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union. However, based on what we have seen and heard this morning, I am much reassured. We look forward very much to working closely with the Swedish government, and today's meetings and our discussions with you and your ministers will allow us to hit the ground running on the 1st of January. As you said, we are facing tough challenges in Europe, and the next months will be decisive, especially when it comes to energy and climate. Let me here congratulate you on the very smart and symbolic choice of location for our meeting this morning. In the field of energy, your country is a front runner for the green transition and in fighting climate change, and this will be essential when it comes to us needing to wrap up our negotiations as co-legislators on the climate files, all the climate files, the so-called Fit for 55 package. A lot of discussion also centered around the ongoing work on the still open files and the Migration Pact. We also look forward to the Swedish presidency taking on from what has been a successful Czech presidency in responding to the questions that our citizens pose to us in every member state on migration, and also moving on as we face headwinds on the economy. I believe that the return to growth can be the major achievement of your presidency. In order to boost the economy, you stand for an open, modern and competitive European Union, just like the European Parliament does. Having said this, the biggest threat to Europe and our democracies is still and will continue to be Russia's illegal invasion and relentless bombardment of Ukraine. Sweden has been a great friend to Ukraine, and you have always been true promoters of human rights and democratic values. I therefore also welcome Sweden's decision to join NATO, which is another of Putin's now numerous grave miscalculations, the first two being underestimating the strength of Ukraine, the second being Europe's firm and united response. Let me finally, before taking questions which you may have, also take this opportunity to make a strong appeal to all Swedish cities and towns across the country to join our Generators of Hope campaign. We are currently in full swing collecting power generators and transformers requested from us by the Ukrainians. About over 1 million of Ukrainians are today without electricity, so we are collecting this appeal, and I will extend it also to mayors in Sweden in order to help the Ukrainians get through the harsh winter ahead. This is for water supplies, this is for schools, this is for hospitals. These are essential services that people need, so I would really want to launch this appeal and count on Sweden's also local politicians to join. So that's it from my end. Tack, looking forward to questions.
Tack. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andreas Ebenke, Swedish Television. First of all, I would like to ask a couple of questions to Mrs. Metsola and then to Mr. Kristersson. Mrs. Metsola, what do you think that the Swedish government must accomplish during its tenure? And
That's it, one question.
No, but
you said a couple.
No, but my mic got cut. So sorry. Also, would you like to see more action the coming 6 months against membership countries that don't uphold democratic values, like Hungary, for example? And lastly, can we expect more initiatives to help Ukraine with weapons and similar infrastructure? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we are very much looking forward to the Swedish presidency and the priorities as outlined already, and which the Prime Minister will present to the European Parliament in Strasbourg in January. Focus on competitiveness and growth is welcome. Continued commitment to combat Russia's illegal invasion, ambitions on climate and gender, which is gender equality, which was also something that was mentioned by the colleagues during our meetings, and also how to face the rising inflation, interest rates and energy crisis. This is something that our citizens will continue to increasingly ask in terms of what is the EU, what are member states doing in order to help citizens, small businesses, families pay their bills, because this is something that they are going to face more and more as the winter enters. Secondly, on democratic values, European Parliament has been at the forefront of pushing for the rule of law, the upholding of the so-called Article 2 values of the treaty. We had been pushing for years for there to be a mechanism that would look into the rule of law situation in each and every country. Article 7 has been triggered with regards to 2 countries, and the Swedish government, our colleagues, also confirmed that those processes will continue within the Council. We are waiting today for the decision by the Commission on the Recovery and Resilience Plan, as well as the conditionality mechanism that could be triggered by the Council, for which there will need to be a qualified majority. On this, again, the European Parliament was the front runner of making sure that this is an essential part which would underpin financial support and projects that can go to member states during the economic recovery in the post-pandemic, but now also energy crisis scenario. With regards to more initiatives to Ukraine, the European Parliament has been also at the forefront, first of all, in calling for membership of the EU for Ukraine to become a candidate country. We did that already for Ukraine and Moldova on the 1st of March, just a week after the invasion of of Ukraine by Russia. We have, with unprecedented speed, adopted not only political resolutions with the strongest of language condemning what Russia is doing, but also looking ahead in terms of reconstruction, compensation, making sure, looking at assets recovery, but also going after the aggressors and making sure they are held accountable. With regards to tangible examples, I mentioned the Generators of Hope campaign, but also we vote on all macro-financial assistance that goes to Ukraine. We did that, for example, last week on Thursday. We voted on 18 billion euros to go to Ukraine in terms of macro-financial assistance. This is necessary, and we will continue also to push for further sanctions and also further military assistance. This is something that the Parliament has had, I can say, unprecedented majorities in pushing for across all the political spectrum.
Thank you. And 2 questions to Mr. Kristersson then. You can choose yourself if you want to answer in English or Swedish. They are domestic issues. First of all, your Foreign Minister Billström says that Sweden is now taking steps forward in the talks with Turkey about an accession to NATO. What impression do you have? And also Magdalena Andersson today goes on quite a full attack towards you and says you have been lying to the Swedish people about the electricity price compensation. How do you answer to that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Allow me first in English, just to comment on what Roberta just said. That, I mean, the war is obviously a top priority. Very unfortunately, it is. It will be for our presidency as well. But as is also the fact that Ukraine is a candidate status country, and every kind of follow-up on the 7 criteria for Ukraine to live up to, we will very closely follow them up and confirm the steps they take. And so that will also be a key part of the Swedish presidency. Well, in Swedish, NATO-frågan, Tobias Billström tror jag helt enkelt bekräftade den bild som vi fick häromdagen. Jag hade ju möte med president Erdogan i Ankara och därefter hade vi den delegation som har förhandlat trilateralt i Stockholm här i förra veckan. Och som jag sa efteråt, det var ju första gången som Turkiet tydligt bekräftade också att Sverige levererar på, som man säger, att vi lever upp till och att det händer saker i enlighet med avtalet. Jag tycker att de signaler vi har fått där var väldigt konstruktiva. Sen har jag gång på gång sagt, där ligger inget löfte om en tidsatt turkisk ratificering. Jag uppfattar att samtalet som var i Bukarest nu var på samma tema. Det vill säga bekräftande att Sverige lever upp till avtalet, att vi gör viktiga framsteg. Enskilt viktigaste kanske nu är det faktum att vi har den nya grundlagsändringen på plats och att vi nu kommer lägga proposition om svenskt arbete mot terrorism här i början på året. Och att den lagstiftningen kommer att ha trätt i kraft före sommaren. Det är viktiga steg som Turkiet också bekräftar. Men som sagt, inga datum i den frågan, det är ett turkiskt beslut. Elpriserna tycker jag är mycket märkligt, precis tvärtom. Vi sa att vi skulle komma med ett besked före 1 november, det gjorde vi. Så har flera departement jobbat väldigt intensivt sedan dess och landat också i ett sätt att klara själva utbetalningen av 55 miljarder kronor. Jag tror att de flesta förstår att det är ingenting man gör i en handvändning. Och det presenterades idag och där utbetalningarna kommer igång i februari. Jag tycker vi har gjort precis det vi sa. Jag skulle nog varit mer ödmjuk om jag själv hade varit i en regering som systematiskt har avvecklat svensk kärnkraftsproduktion under lång tid och se till att Sverige idag har färre kärnkraftverk än vi annars skulle haft och stoppat de nya. Då tycker jag lite ödmjukhet har varit klädsamt för den som har demonterat en viktig del av svensk elproduktion.
Thank you. Niklas Svan from Swedish news agency TT. To Mrs. Metsola, the Sweden Democrats is a coalition partner to the government. What kind of information have you gotten from Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson about the influence of the Sweden Democrats over the government's EU politics? And to Ulf Kristersson, what is the influence actually of the Sweden Democrats of the EU politics from the government? Thank you.
So thank you for this question. Yes, the role of the Sweden Democrats was raised by a number of colleagues and the way the government will operate. I must say I am grateful to the Prime Minister for his clear pro-European commitment. And therefore we look forward for the next 6 months to keeping that pro-European commitment firmly on the agenda. And we were repeatedly reassured that the work from a legislative perspective that has been started during this mandate, even some files that have been blocked for a very long time and are starting finally to be unblocked under the work of the Czech presidency, can continue under the Swedish presidency.
Well, thank you. Well, I described, of course, the fact that this is a pro-European government. Also, it's a pro-market government, it's a pro-NATO government, it's a pro-transatlantic government, it's pro quite a lot of things, honestly. And that does not mean you always have exactly the same views on how the EU to operate. Or not even what kind of topics should be on the main agenda. That's very legitimate in a democracy. I also described the Swedish kind of background in these matters, the fact that nowadays we have 8 parties out of 8 that are in favor of Sweden being an EU member. That is not unimportant. It used to be 5 out of 8, 2 on the left side and 2 on the right side, that did not approve the Swedish EU membership. That has changed. So that goes for both sides of the aisle, so to speak. But our commitments to the EU is very, very strong. I think that is no secret for anybody. And we also had a good reason to describe the domestic agenda of Sweden. What kind of agreements have been made between the government and the Sweden Democrats to solve very severe Swedish problems. And that agenda is an agenda we will stick to. So that's basically it.
Okay, firstly, 2 questions for Madam President. The first question is, of course, Sweden and Malta are comparatively small countries within the EU.
Comparatively, smaller.
So what do you suggest that Sweden kind of focus on if you should pick one issue, one task during the Swedish presidency? That's my first question.
Thank you. I like to say that I come from a smaller country, but I represent the whole European Parliament, and I think it's quite fascinating to see that you can have institutions that are led by members who don't come from, let's say, the traditionally larger countries, and in the European Parliament there's nothing big or small. That's to be clear. Secondly, I also have experiences with many different presidencies, and when you have the commitment of presidencies to focus either on issues such as growth and competitiveness, to continue the work of the previous and incoming presidencies, because we work in the context of a trio presidencies. Also, when your presidency comes at a time during a legislative mandate which is essential, 1 year before the elections, 2024 European elections, high legislative activity, how many of those files are closed? I mentioned them again: on climate, on migration, on the digital area, on artificial intelligence, due diligence, chips. It could be, there are many different legislative files that we got a very firm commitment from our Swedish colleagues today that they will continue that work. So if I had to look at the upcoming 6 months, I would look for a very efficient presidency that can be matched with a very efficient parliament.
And I think the president is a good example of that smaller countries can provide greater politicians.
Seems to be hard to pick one issue, one
Because
question.
we are in if you can see, we are in a cauldron of crisis at the moment, and that's the backdrop that will dominate the next 6 months.
I do actually have a local question for you
For me.
from Malta today. They sent us the question, do you agree with the legal amendment being proposed in your home country by the government to allow abortion in cases of women's life being at risk?
Yeah, that is a discussion that is taking place in the Maltese Parliament these days. I'm here as President of the European Parliament, as I've said, ever since I became Vice President and then President, is that the position of the Parliament, which is very clear on this issue, is also my position.
Thank you. Then I should try to switch to Swedish, I think. My first question will be to try to persuade Ulf Kristersson to pick one issue that's his heart issue that you will work with when you get the chairmanship.
Well, I mean, obviously, Swedish or English?
This first one you can do.
I mean, obviously, the war against Ukraine is a defining situation. I think you simply cannot over-exaggerate the importance of that issue. And of course, I mean, that goes for us, but it goes much more for the Ukrainians, obviously. But everything we can do to stick to unity, to stick to transatlantic unity, to cope with all the effects that war has also on other European countries in terms of energy, for example, in terms of all the attempts from Russia's side to make a division between European countries, which I think the President so elegantly described that we have so far been extremely successful in avoiding. I think one of the many things that Russia really underestimated was the unity of the European Union countries. That is also a way to say that severe crisis management is really a key competence of the EU. We proved that during the pandemic as well. We prove it now. But we also have to do things outside crisis management, competitiveness, climate change, things like that. So this is really a test of our ability to have focus on immediate crisis as well as European long-term challenges.
Two short questions in Swedish.
Yeah.
Har du ljugit om elstödet?
Nej, verkligen inte. Vi har gjort exakt det vi sa. Vi sa att vi skulle presentera ett stöd före den 1 november. Vi till och med påskyndade den utredning som den förra regeringen långsamt hade bett om svar senare. Det gjorde vi. De presenterade ett förslag som var möjligt att genomföra och nu har det gått ett antal veckor och vi presenterar idag exakt hur de utbetalningarna ska ske. Ska 55 miljarder kronor betalas ut på ett rättssäkert sätt så tror jag de flesta förstår att det gör man inte i en handvändning. Nu har Försäkringskassan beskrivit tillsammans med 2 ministrar idag hur det här ska gå till. Jag tycker det är ödmjukhet från en tidigare regering som aktivt har lagt ner svensk kärnkraftsproduktion och därmed varit medansvariga för att skapa det här problemet hade varit på sin plats.
Nu chansar jag lite utanför dagens ämne, men här. Har du någonting att säga angående det brister i vittnesskyddet i Sverige som uppdagas de senaste veckorna?
För dagen tror jag inte att jag har det, men det har jag säkert om du ger mig en chans att titta på frågan.
Okay, thank you both of you.
Thank you so much.